Over the years, senseless gun violence and police encounters have led to the countless deaths of unarmed black men. I take a look into the uproar over police brutality and one of the most powerful civil rights movements to emerge since the 60s. I'm Dana Kamal. This is Our Issues, Twin Cities. Minneapolis is one of the latest cities up in arms over the death of yet another unarmed black man. 24-year-old Jamar Clark is the latest fatality after being shot in the head on November 15th during a struggle with police officers, promoting more than 2 weeks of protests, urging state and federal investigators for answers. Today's events have not looked too unfamiliar from the past. In 1991, taxi driver Rodney King was beaten by Los Angeles police officers following a high-speed car chase. The captured footage of King's beating ignited riots across America and raised public concern about police treatment of minorities.
When I was 12 years old and me and my friends had called for the police their help, and they actually treated us like criminals.
Because of his personal experience, Marcus has been advocating for police accountability for years.
I've been pulled over 49 times, for no reason. And I've been harassed, I've been terrorized by police, and I was actually assaulted right there on Plymouth Avenue, like 4 blocks from where they killed Jamar Clark.
How has that affected your life?
Well, it's traumatized me, When I was in my teens, it gives you a sense of hopelessness and feeling disenfranchised, second-class citizen. It makes you very angry, disheartened, and disillusioned.
Justice! The uproar over police brutality resurfaced in 2012 when 17-year-old Trayvon Martin was shot and killed by a man following the teen, claiming he was suspicious. In 2014, Michael Brown was fatally shot by a white Ferguson police officer, sparking existing tensions in the majority black city and protests all over the nation. Since then, over 1,000 or more people have died at the hands of law enforcement officers acting in the line of duty.
Police brutality has always been around. I can't imagine it going away.
Lenny is an activist raising awareness to the challenges facing African Americans in the U.S. today. So why is it continuously happening?
I think there's always going to be a segment of this population that believes that people of color do not deserve to be in America. The issue with the police is that governing a group of people cannot take place unless you have some sense of you're governing yourself. So in this case, it's always the same thing. A white guy walks in, tells a black kid what to do. That's the mentality in our community. So when the police come in, if he doesn't live in your neighborhood, he doesn't have any relationship in your neighborhood, suddenly he gets a Gestapo kind of mentality. I'm here to teach you how to live. And criminalizing black life is one of the problems that I see tremendously. When you incarcerate in any given day, you can walk around with somebody and put them in jail for something, because there's so many rules, so many regulations, so many laws that you're supposed to obey every day.
When you're a young person, and that's when the police really target us, when we're in our teens and our 20s, that's when, the weight of the world is too hard to bear with them, attacking us. We have young black kids who are like, they're trying to take us out. That's what people feel right now, today.
Jamar Clark was killed in North Minneapolis, one of the most impoverished neighborhoods in the Twin Cities with a high concentration of violent crimes. At Lucy Craft Laney Community School in North Minneapolis, Principal Mari Melander dedicates her time to change the lives of the students, many who are homeless or have unstable housing, through education. In the light of the recent shooting of 5 protesters in Minneapolis following the death of Jamar Clark, Mari gave a powerful message to her students. What message did you convey to them that day?
That morning, waking up to find out that there had been protesters that were shot at and shot, it sent me into kind of like an emotional tailspin. The first message that I wanted them to know and understand is I wanted to call it out and say, so we know there have been protests happening. We're part of the 4th precinct. We're just down the street and not that far away. I called out the fact that the protesters had been shot, but they hadn't died. And yet it just is sitting very heavy around us, and that it was sitting very heavy within me. And I needed them to know that I'm not immune to that I'm deeply connected to that and to what's happening. I wanted them to know that regardless of what's happening around us, right, that within the 4 walls of this building, we will continue to do us. So the safety that they know that they can rely on, the order, the structure, the predictability, the things that like we strive for every day, that's still gonna happen.
In Minnesota, the unemployment rate among African Americans is almost 4 times higher than Caucasians. In our prison systems, people of color make up a vast majority of our inmates.
Do you ever worry about your kids, your students here becoming another statistic?
Absolutely. And I think that's been one of the things that's hard about the current outrage is because, not that there shouldn't be, but I have 500 kids in this building, and some years ago Jamar Clark could have been one of them, and one of them could be Jamar Clark. And so are we gonna wait until the Jamar Clarks of the world are dead and gone before the outrage really bubbles up? I mean, this has been ongoing for centuries.
When we return, one of the most powerful civil rights movements sparked by the recent events. Through the protests of police brutality towards African Americans over the years, one of the most powerful civil rights movements since the 60s emerged. The organization began with the hashtag Black Lives Matter in 2013 after the acquittal of George Zimmerman in the shooting death of Trayvon Martin. Soon after, cities across America formed their own chapters, channeling the national movement. Black Lives Matter Minneapolis was formed, demanding more police accountability and transparency.
We were able to shut down Highway 55 when the non-indictment happened, and that's kind of where like BLM Minneapolis like spurred from, because after that everyone's like, who is this group that shut down the highway? Like who are you guys? Because the message was very much so framed like Black Lives Matter, like we were saying, like we wanted an end to, you know, the killing of unarmed Black people.
Michael McDowell is one of the 8 leaders of the Minneapolis Black Lives Matter chapter.
It was really a big moment for me because it really got under my parents' skin, and they're just like, you know, this is not okay. You know, my siblings were like, this is not okay. And, you know, I was feeling the same way too. And there was just a lot of anger and a lot of, you know, frustration that day, especially, you know, when Michael Brown was killed, yes, but then also like the non-indictment.
How significant is this issue today?
Major, but it's always been. The biggest thing that's different now is the storage mediums that are allowed to capture what they've done.
The advancement of the digital world and accessibility to social media through cell phones, computers, and laptops has played a key role in the recent widespread coverage of police brutality throughout the U.S.
This has just kind of been ongoing for many, many decades. Why has the media now just been picking up on this and broadcasting it?
What really has made this a social issue to the forefront has been the advent of digital storage. Years ago, you couldn't store the amount of things that they can store now from a video camera. It was not a situation. So the advent of technology has now perpetuated a whole new group of a way to fight, because once again, the GoPro cameras, you know, the pin cameras, all these things, they can use them, and next thing you know, the media can't be controlled. YouTube, you broadcast when you want to.
Social media is a catalyst for greater, you know, mass media attention on it. I mean, if videos go viral, there's so much information sharing on the web. And, you know, it's visual, it's audio.
Technology has made citizen journalism more accessible worldwide. Many of the recent high-profile cases have been caught on camera, exposing police misbehavior today.
In Chicago now, they're trying to find 86 minutes of Burger King footage. Well, according to Burger King, that's 86 minutes that's missing. According to the police, no. There is no 86 minutes. We didn't remove the 86 minutes. If they hadn't showed the young man being shot 14 times on the ground, then there would be no way to say what occurred.
High-profile cases have created tensions across America, including here in Minneapolis, as protesters continue to demand answers and justice.
We do it for everywhere! Black Lives Matter!
A movement driven by young people. Black Lives Matter has been at the forefront of many of these mass protests, focusing most of their efforts around police accountability and racial disparities.
Over the last few years, we have witnessed countless of incidents of high-profile deaths of Black men at the hands of police officers. How do we find a peaceful solution between our police and citizens?
I think it's first acknowledging that, especially with the Black Lives Matter movement, like we're not saying that we hate police or that all police are bad, but we're saying that we want to figure out how to hold police accountable.
The police feel like they're above the law, and they're just a part of this larger, you know, prison industrial complex, which is one of the worst, parts of American culture. I mean, we're the incarceration nation, and there's a major paradigm shift in law enforcement that I think needs to, no one really addresses it, but they measure effectiveness based on the quantity of arrests as opposed to the quality. And so they have these broken windows theories, they do all this racial profiling, which just criminalizes young Black people and poor people. And they get rewarded for the more arrests they make. They get federal grants based on, having to make a lot of arrests.
You gotta have more self-governance. You cannot continue to say that only people that can come in our community or designated our communities through the invisible walls that are designated our communities, and say we're gonna be the only people that determine when you're doing something wrong, determine when you're doing something right. The system of judges also have to be able to say, you know what, this is really not a crime that we want to go and punish somebody for. When you take a group of people and you make them the commodity of a system, which is how African Americans and minorities are, they're the commodities. That's where the self-governance comes in, because we should be able to do more than just always incarcerate someone.
Community organizers and activists like Michael say it's important to acknowledge that not all cops are bad cops, and they are working with police force in Minneapolis to create change.
Are you also working with the African American community on how to interact with the police community as well?
We've had some trainings where we've talked to folks on how to non-violently interact with police, especially for all of our protests. That's one of the big things we talk about is safety. We want to figure out how we can keep folks safe. And that's one of the biggest things, figuring out how you can non-violently interact with police and also just outside agitators in general. But we're looking to actually have more trainings where we're talking to folks about kind of know your rights type trainings, what you should and should not do with law enforcement, which is sad that that has to be a thing, but we are looking to have trainings like that.
How are you using your personal experience to shed light on what is currently happening?
Well, I just like to show up, and I don't usually want to speak out unless I'm asked to. But I share my story because so many victims of police brutality, of excessive racial profiling, don't tell their stories. I mean, most of the people who are harassed and brutalized don't even file complaints because they don't think anything is happening. And so I encourage people who have been victims of police harassment and abuse, terrorism, to tell their story, to file those complaints. Even if nothing's going to happen, we have to, we have to demand justice.
Up next on Our Issues Twin Cities, a community putting racial justice at the center of their mission. Do you think racism is alive and well in this country today?
Of course. I mean, racism is America's original sin, the genocide of Native Americans and the enslavement and segregation of African Americans.
Historically, if you look at just how we were brought to this country and the history of like chattel slavery, just the civil rights movement, and just the label of us even being written as 3/5 human in the Constitution, like that was actually a real thing. I think people like to forget that, but like black people were actually written as 3/5 human.
Racism is not a problem for people of color, it's a white problem. It's white silence, it's white complicity, it's white disengagement from these systems and structures.
Over on DuPont Avenue in South Minneapolis, racial justice is one of the main issues Minister Justin Schroeder is tackling at the First Universalist Church.
It's 2015 and we are still fighting racism. Why do you think racism still exists today?
In large part, it exists today because white people have been absent from that conversation. We have been silent, we have been disengaged, we have not seen ourselves as having any kind of role in addressing this ongoing oppression in our country.
As a Unitarian church, how are you confronting the racial inequality we are facing currently?
Our first step is really, I would say, this awakening we had a couple of years ago, recognizing that our faith, which suggests and we deeply believe that each person is beloved of God, that each person has worth and dignity, that the essence of that faith, that all are valued, every human being is valued, and the existence of racism, a system that distorts and destroys and damages human lives, those two things cannot exist together.
The church recently passed the Racial Justice Resolution, affirming to fight and address structural racism through their work, ministry, and education.
Resolution states that we are affirming our commitment to racial justice, and we stand with the community that is suffering.
Ben is a leader of the Racial Justice Program.
And we are working to educate ourselves and create change within the congregation to address these issues.
How important is this resolution today in today's society?
It's extremely important. It's an opportunity for this church to educate ourselves on the long history of race and racism and whiteness in this country. And it's an opportunity for us as white people in a predominantly white congregation to bring about change and bring about a voice that has been silent for so many years.
Why do you think that voice has been silent for so many years?
I think, well, white people have been scared, and white people have stood on the sidelines for a lack of understanding, a lack of knowledge of the history, and also because they've benefited from these policies and these injustices, and so there's been a lack of momentum for them to give voice to these issues.
White communities across the Twin Cities, including the First Universalist Church, are standing in solidarity with Black Lives Matter to bring awareness to racial justice.
As a congregation, how are you working with Black Lives Matter to stand by them?
There are many dimensions to our racial justice work that we're doing as a faith community. One of those is responding to the call from Black Lives Matter. They have asked white faith communities, white clergy, to stand with them, and we have responded to that call to stand in solidarity and to disrupt business as usual, to raise awareness and say the unarmed killing of Black men and women and children has to stop. These racial disparities in education and in housing and education, that has to stop. So we have responded to that call and have stood in solidarity with them.
They're the best thing since sliced bread, they really are. I wouldn't want to work with any other children in the world.
Principal Mari of Lucy Craft Laney Community School believes changes within the community begins with the children who are the future of tomorrow.
As a principal, as a role model, as a mentor to these students, how are you preparing them for a brighter future?
We believe that proficiency is critical, and students being able to read and write and do all of those things are hugely important. But my kids are more than a test score, and we live in a society where that is oftentimes how you're defined or how success is identified for you as a child. And so probably the biggest thing that I take seriously for me in changing outcomes is identifying who they really are and acknowledging and honoring who they are. Everything about them is beautiful. Everything about them is worth the cost. Everything about them is precious.
With everything that's been going on with police brutality, unemployment, other issues affecting the African American community today, what are your hopes for the future of the African American community in America?
I would love for there not to be a line where you'd be able to see a difference, where you can't really tell the difference between when you drive from a black neighborhood to a white neighborhood.
Although the Black Lives Matter movement is just over 2 years old, their widespread exposure and influence is felt across the nation.
What changes do you guys hope to see in the future?
We want to see a state really where black folks and people of color can actually like thrive, and where they're not victimized for the color of their skin. They're not pulled over for ridiculous reasons because of the color of their skin.
When we become more manufacturers, more producers, more entrepreneurial spirit, and realize that we've only been at it about 60 years. Because for years, people of color couldn't own businesses. So we gotta have the ability to fail in order for us to have the ability to succeed. Everyone can't do it.
Is a racist-free world possible?
Yes, that has to be the guiding North Star for our work, that we truly could live in a country where the inherent worth and dignity of everyone is recognized, where the gifts and the opportunities for all of us to thrive are real and present.
Thank you for joining me this week on Our Issues Twin Cities. I'm Rana Kamal. See you next time.